Hi, everyone. I hope you are doing well and safe. This is just a reminder that you are tuned into 17 for 17, Advocating for Girls' Education, a virtual event that's bringing together 17 speakers around girls' education to celebrate my 17th birthday, but also stand in solidarity with girls around the world who cannot go to school. I'm super excited to introduce our next two speakers, Afua and Abby. They will be speaking together about Abby's book, The Girl with the Louding Voice, and sharing how girls' education is so important to them and how education has impacted their own lives. And so I'm super excited to tune in, and I hope you all are as well. With that, I'll leave it to Abby and Afua.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and happy birthday, Jana, and congratulations on hosting this incredible experience. My name is Afua Osei. I am a media entrepreneur and a co-founder of She Leads Africa, and I'm so excited to serve as your moderator for today's session. I am joined by Abby Daré, who's joining us from the UK. Abby is an author and a lawyer and the incredible writer of The Girl with the Louding Voice. So Abby, hello and welcome to today's session.
Hey, Afua. Hi, how are you? Lovely to be here. And happy birthday, Jana.
I know. So I promise you, when I was 17, I wasn't doing this kind of really incredible work either. So I think it's so great that Jana is using her voice and her resources to bring us together as a community. So, Abby, I'm going to ask you, when you were turning 17, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up? What was your goal at the time?
It's funny you said that because I was thinking about this yesterday. Definitely not as ambitious as what Jana is doing, which is incredible. But when I was 17, I was thinking about being a lawyer, actually. I thought it would be great to advocate for others using my law, or trying to get a law degree. I didn't become a lawyer in the end, but I did think that would be a great thing to do. So yes, I had a bit of ambition then.
I love it. And so what inspired you to want to be a lawyer? Because I know so many people, when they think about what they want to do, where they want to go, it's based on who they've seen. It's based on what they've seen in the media or in their family. But what was it about the law that really spoke to you and attracted you?
I think for me, it was the love of words. I knew that lawyers spoke a lot, they talked a lot, and they did a lot of writing and reading. As a child, I used to love reading and writing. And my mother's a huge influence in my life, and I dedicated the book to her. And she said to me that, you should be a lawyer. And I think growing up, especially for people like myself who grew up in Nigeria and Africa, you're told what to become. That is changing now. Now we're asking our children, what do you want to become? But in my case, I was told you should be a lawyer. And I thought it makes sense because I wanted to read and write and advocate for people. So I think that's where that came from. But then as I transitioned and left Nigeria and studied law, I realized that I could do something else apart from be a lawyer. I could use my words in a different way. But it really came from my mother saying, I think you'll be a good lawyer. So.
Shout out to all the mothers out there who are supporting us and encouraging us. But the story that you shared, it really just spoke to me around sometimes we don't have options due to family, due to culture, due to society. And your book, The Girl with the Louding Voice, tells the story of a young girl who has her options are limited, and how she really is thinking about how does she fight those limiting options, and how does she go and create a life that's bigger than what maybe others expect of her or what she sees around her. So can you tell us a little bit about the book and the motivation that you had for writing this book and telling this story?
Sure, thank you. That's a brilliant question. So the book came about because of my childhood, growing up in Lagos in Nigeria. I lived in a neighborhood where it was very common for families, including my family, to hire young girls as housemaids to work. And one thing I noticed was that many of these girls were about my age. So say I was about 9, 10, you could find a girl about 9, 10 working for a family. I noticed that while I was off to school, getting ready, many of these girls will be back at home and working for families. Now I had questions that I wanted to ask, but I couldn't ask them because I was brought up in a society where it was permitted for you to be silent and not speaking up as a child. And so the questions were internalized. I did wonder why these girls were working as maids. I also noticed that around me, many of these girls, well, some of them were not very well treated. So when I left and had my own children, and I had a conversation with my daughter, and she was asking me about, I asked her to do some chores in the kitchen. And her reaction was one of, I really don't want to do this. I said, do you know that girls like you who are probably working for families like mine in Nigeria. And she said, why? And so I went on the journey of trying to discover why. The Girl with the Louding Voice is a story of a young girl, Aduni, and she's 14 years old, who grew up in rural Nigeria in poverty. Her mother, who was always advocated for education, dies. And so Aduni sold to become the third wife of a much local man. Aduni runs away from that situation and ends up becoming a housemaid. But she never gives up on her dream. She continues to pursue her education. And everywhere she finds herself, she uses it as an opportunity to learn. So The Girl with the Louding Voice is Aduni's story, her journey. It's an inspirational story. And it's just a story of a girl who does not give up on her dreams. And that's what I'm trying to say in this, that do not give up on your dreams and your goals in getting an education.
And thank you so much for Abby. And we know from the research and from our day-to-day lives that there are millions and millions of young girls who are not in school, who are currently experiencing this life as house help with their options limited, with no access to education. And so from releasing the book, right, did you want there to be a policy shift? Was your intention to write this book and be an activist? Or what did you want to come about by sharing this book and sharing this story for the millions of girls who are currently facing this situation?
Thank you for that. So the book started from me. So I read an article the night I had that conversation with my daughter. So to just backtrack a little bit, the night I had that conversation with my daughter, and I said to her that these young girls work for families. I told her a bit of a background. That night I could not sleep because I had a flashback to me growing up. So I decided to do some research online to find out. I lived in England now, but I was always going back to Nigeria. But I also wanted to go online and see if there was anything I could read up on this situation. And I found a lot of article after article of girls working for families and many of them being abused. Now, it got to one particular one about this 13-year-old girl who had hot water poured on her by the woman who employed her. Now, it wasn't just the horrific injuries that got to me. It was the fact that this girl was reported as another statistic. Her face was blurred. There was nothing about her. It was really just about, this has happened, know about it, and that's the end. And so my question was, who is this girl? What are her dreams? What are her hopes and aspirations? So I went about writing the book, trying to understand the girl behind the maids that I knew growing up, the girl that wants to have her dreams. Now, I wanted to join a conversation that had already started. There were people out there advocating that young girls go to school, that they be educated. But I also wanted to join that conversation. I had no idea that my book would be published. I just wanted to tell a story of the girl. I wanted to know who she was because I felt that this girl, if anyone knew who she was and understood that she was a human being that is embodied with intelligence, with talent, with aspirations and dreams, the future of tomorrow, she should not be silenced. And so that was the beginning of my story. But as I wrote the book and I began to explore more themes and bring it together, I thought, well, maybe this can actually do a lot more than me just telling a story about the girl. It could actually change things. And so what I hope now is that everyone reading the book, from where I'm from Nigeria, for all over the world, where we see things like child labor happening, where girls are denied an education, can read the book and understand that, look, this girl is talent. This girl is the future of tomorrow. Speak up for her and give her an opportunity to learn. So I'm hoping that, yes, mindsets begin to change. And hopefully from a change in mindset, we begin to have a conversation about changing policies, enforcing these policies, and that there is consequence for the actions that people take when they start to bring girls out of school or deny them an education. It is a human right.
And what I really like the most is that you are coming from the position of a mother, of someone who watched this separately, and other people are coming from an advocacy perspective. Other people are representing the voice of young girls. So we all have a part to play in this entire process and in this entire community to use our voices to advocate for change the way that we know how to do it. And I think sometimes people who are in the arts, as creatives, as painters, as musicians, as authors, the question is, how can I make an impact and how can I make a change? And you were able to use the written word and to use storytelling to bring to life this scenario in this situation. So in case someone reading a newspaper, it doesn't resonate with them, perhaps reading that story and really getting into the mindset of that young girl, it maybe could shift or change their perspective.
Absolutely. And that's what I've been getting. I've been getting a lot of people, Nigerians, not just anyone outside of the culture, who have lived in that culture, seen it. When something is a norm, when something that is acceptable, sometimes you need to step away a little bit. to be able to see things and understand this needs to change. I've had a lot of people reach out to me to say, Abby, thank you for writing this story, because now I understand. The girls I knew that worked for my family, I didn't see them like that. Like, you know, they would come in, put their bags down and start to work. No one thought to ask them, what do you want to become in future? What are your dreams? Even I, who grew up in so to say privilege, I wasn't really asked that question. And it's things like this that I'm trying to show that, look, these are girls that need to be spoken to as if they can hear, because they can, and they're great girls that have a great future. So yes, absolutely.
That's great. So we got a question from the community, and they wanted to know the name of the book. So Abby, do you have a book with you that you can show us?
I'm gonna swallow.
Yes, please. The book is called The Girl with the Louding Voice.
Girl with the Louding Voice.
Right. So please do look it up online if you would like to read it, and you can definitely visit Abby's website and social media. But what I really like is sometimes some of us think that culture holds us back, right? Culture means that we're not allowed to talk about certain issues, but your book really shows that even within the culture, that some things just shouldn't be okay. So the term, the louding voice, is pidgin, right? It's Nigerian pidgin, it's slang. And so can you share how you wanted to make sure that this was relevant to the culture, and that Nigerians, West Africans, or anybody in emerging markets would read it and be able to really feel like they understood and they could connect with the story?
Right. So a little bit about the voice of the character in the book. So what I saw growing up was that many of the girls that had worked, not just for my family, families around me, had a way of speaking English. For those that were not educated, some of them were, but for those that were not educated, had a way of navigating the language in their own way. So they would make up words to try and express themselves. And even my daughter, when she was 2, I was writing this book when she was 2. She was born in England, but she still was navigating English language in her own way, because obviously she had not been exposed to the detail that I had been, or anyone else has been who's gone through the educational system. And so what I wanted to do was to try and make it as authentic as I could be. So I wrote it in this voice, which is a bit of pidgin, a bit of broken English, a bit of Aduni's own words. I did make up a lot of words in the story. And so in this case, louding for Aduni comes from a conversation her mother had with her, when her mother said to her that your education would give you a voice. It would allow you to speak. It will allow you to be heard. And Aduni says, I don't just want to have any voice. I want a louding voice. I want to have a legacy. I want to create an impact. And I believe that every one of us was put on earth for a purpose, for a reason. And Aduni realizes at a very young age that it's not just for me to get an education, but I have to look behind me and bring people along with me. Young girls like myself who have not been able to get an education, I want to pave a way for them to be able to get one. So louding voice really is finding that your talent, your voice, that education you deserve, and creating a lasting legacy and having an impact. It's a long-lasting thing. So that's where that came from. But it was from the broken English.
It's fantastic. And what I want everyone to know who's tuning in is that we all can use our skills, our talents, our expertise to amplify the stories of others and to help them achieve their purpose, achieve their legacy. And so this book is just a way for us to get inspired and encouraged. I see Rasha has shared that, Abby, this is very inspiring. So thank you so much, Rasha, for that comment. And so, Abby, I would love to just see that, you know, you've written this book. People are reading it. People are loving it. What else do you think that we can do when it comes to the issues of young girls not being able to be in school, having to work for their livelihoods, not having access to education? What happens after the book? And what can we be doing right now to help amplify the voices of these young girls who don't have many options?
So what we're doing right now is one of the things. So the wonderful idea that Jana came up with to say, for my birthday, this is what I'm going to do, is an example. It's about using whatever means you have to speak up against that which you believe in this case, girl education. It's so important, because if girls are educated, a whole nation is transformed for the better. It's about ensuring that, I'll give you an example. I spoke to a young teacher who works with the Malala Fund, and she read my book. She teaches young children in a remote community who are like Aduni, And we had a conversation over Skype. And she said, Abby, I'm a teacher, but this has inspired me to pay attention, a little more attention to the girls in my class who are like Aduni. I will give them opportunities after school, for instance, to teach them a little bit more, because I know that the access to education they have is difficult. So it's about reaching out to the next person. It's about speaking up when you reasonably suspect that a child is being held in child labor. It's about influencing policies and decisions. It's about signing petitions online when one comes up and somebody says, let's put a stop to this. It's about using every opportunity you have. Social media is practically cheap and accessible for everyone possible. Use that. Malala is an example of somebody who I really admire, because she used her own way, her blog, which is where it started from. And then she almost lost her life in the process of speaking for girl education. And now we're there. Everyone is speaking about it. So it's anything you have at your fingertips. Use it. It can make a difference.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic, Abby. And what I really love about it is that it doesn't matter at which level you are. It doesn't matter. As a young person, as an older person, as a corporate person, as a creative, starting with what you have, using the resources you have to let people know that this is serious. It's a priority. It's something that needs to be invested in, and we need to be focused on it, because the implications are they're so long lasting for communities, for societies, for countries, and we really do need to make an impact. So what would you like to see more of, Abby, right? Is there a part 2 to the book? Are we going to hear what happens to her, down the line, or what happens next with the story?
It's interesting you asked that question. So my mother, who is very academic and who influenced me greatly in my pursuit of education, she is somebody who's probably the most educated woman I know. She hasn't read a word of fiction in about 30 years. Now, because of the lockdown, she picked up my book. She was in the UK for the book launch, and she took a copy back to Nigeria, and she read it. And she called me and said, now, have you got a pen? I said, yes, Mom. She said, I need you to write these things down. This is what is going to happen next. And she gave me wonderful ideas for the sequel of The Girl with the Louding Voice. And then after that conversation, she sent me an email and said, further to our conversation, I've written it down so you don't forget. That is the kind of woman she is. And so what I'm trying to say is that, everyone wants a sequel. It'll be wonderful, but we'll see how it goes. What I hope really is that this book impacts everyone positively, that there's a mindset, not just for girl education, but for reaching out for your dreams. Many people are educated, but have no idea of what next. What am I going to do with my degree? What am I going to do with my secondary school education? What next for me? It's constantly asking yourself, how can I make impact? How can I improve? What are my gifts and talents? In the book, Aduni is a character that sings. And through her singing, she was able to change even the most cruel of people. One of the characters who wasn't very nice to her. Through Aduni's singing and kindness, she was able to try to influence that person to be good. And so it's just about looking at what you have and making a difference in another person's life. It's about a little bit of kindness. We're in a situation where being at home has made everyone think, what else can I do? It's not just me. When you're left by yourself, you look around you and think, what else can I do? So it's really about a lot of that, and just making sure that you're reaching out to the next person and influencing lives positively.
That's so great. That's so great. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Abby. Where can we access the book? How can we get this book in our hands? How can we read it? How can we share it? We want a copy.
So the book is available on all bookstores right now. I know because of the lockdown, there might be a bit of issues with accessing, but do check. It's on Amazon. It's in the US, it's in practically all the bookstores in the UK, it's in Waterstones and everywhere else. So it's readily available. And the conversation is happening. It's been well received. I'm so grateful for that, because it tells me that the conversation is ready to be had and that people are willing to speak up and make a change.
Yes, I love that. And if we wanted to teach the book in our schools or in our communities, are there resources available, or what would you recommend that we do around how we can tell the story? And I think sometimes people get nervous about preaching. They get nervous about, being heavy-handed. What methods have you found have been effective in having these conversations with people who may not agree with you or who don't understand your side, to let them know this is serious and it's important and they should care about it?
So for me, what I used was my weapon of storytelling. It was me basically going through lots of research online, understanding. I saw the statistic that 130 million girls out of school. It was just looking at the statistic and thinking, what is available at my disposal to be able to break this down? And I did that by creating this character, Aduni, with her broken English, and she told her story. So it's using whatever is available at your disposal. I saw an article you wrote, Afua, actually on women on the Guardian about women who had no access to funding. So you've used something at your disposal. You've written an article, and I read that and I thought that's true actually, because they're not educated, gender bias, they have no access to funding for what they're doing. So it's anything you have at your disposal. People sing for change, for global change. So I would say that, you know, if you're reading my book, hopefully my book breaks it down because it tells you the story. You can focus on one girl, but it's not just about one girl, it's about millions of girls. And you can press the book in somebody else's hands, tell them to read it, or listen to songs, or, you know, or write a poem, anything you can to be able to advocate for this. It's wonderful if you can.
Okay, and so you mentioned your daughter at the beginning and how your daughter wasn't too keen to do any type of housework or cleaning, right? Did the book change her mind? Did you going through this process change how she thought about privilege? So I think for those of us who are blessed to have opportunities, it can be hard to put ourselves in the shoes of other people who are in those positions.
That's a very good question, actually. I think it ties back to the previous question you asked me. So the conversation I had with my daughter went this way. So I asked her to help with offloading the dishwasher, and she threw tantrums. She was like, I want Haribo's, I don't want to do it. And so I said to her, and it's something I've said many times. I said, look, like I said to you, I said, there are young girls like you who are probably working for families like mine. But for some reason on that day, and sometimes it's about repetition, I'd said this a number of times, but on that day, she stopped and said, Mom, what do you mean? Are they working like you're working in an office? Do they get paid? Well, can I get paid? And I said, no, you can't get paid because they don't get paid. And I explained to her that work for these girls meant chores. It meant no holidays. It meant for some families not being fed properly. It meant for some girls being abused. But obviously I didn't use those. I broke it down for her in a way she could understand. And that got her thinking. And so now I see that from that conversation, and so it's about having conversations. She hasn't read my book yet because she's 11 and some of the themes in the book are a bit advanced for her age, but she will read it. But what happened as a result of that conversation that evening was my daughter is now very considerate. So when she's eating food and she can't finish it, she goes, Mom, I'm not going to throw this away because there might be somebody else out there who cannot afford to eat. And those are the conversations that I have with my own children, to say to them, where you are right now, it wasn't by your choice. Aduni that I wrote about in my book did not bargain with God before she was brought to earth to say, I want to be born into poverty. She found herself in poverty, as many do. So it's about having empathy and understanding that no one chooses to be where they are, and having those conversations. And like I said, those conversations could be in story writing, in storytelling, in songs, in poem, or just having oral conversations like you and I are having. So it's really just that. And so to answer your question, she hasn't read the book yet, but it did, that conversation that night has made her a more considerate person, somebody who understands that I am privileged and I should not take advantage of it.
I think that the message of empathy is so important, especially as all across the globe, there is crisis and there's a lack of compassion and understanding amongst people and between people. So that lesson of just putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding where they're coming from, and while you can be grateful for where you are, is also to do your best to help others who haven't been as blessed as you've been to get access to those opportunities. I think it's an important lesson for us all to not only learn, but to remember and keep going in all of the work that we do. Now, Abby, yes, you've been featured, like your book was featured in so many global publications. It's received a lot of press. I know there are probably some young women on this chat who have aspirations to tell their stories. They have aspirations to get published. They want to be in the New York Times. How did you, of course, get the process that you had to start and like write the book, but then also to get it to the world? And what tips would you share for someone else who says, you know what, there's an issue I want to talk about. I want to talk about the environment. I want to talk about menstrual health. I want to talk about education. How can they get their story out to the world and have it make an impact like yours has?
Thank you for that question. So I would say that I'll tell you very quickly my story. I started writing from maybe the age of 4. And when I say writing, I mean that I would take out the family album and I would draw speech bubbles on my mother and my father's pictures and let them have conversations. That was where it started from. And then that moved on to me writing into journals. So if you're If you have a journal right now, you have online blogs, please use it, because you do not know where that would end. But I then moved into writing into blogs and journals. When I left Nigeria and came over to England to study, I started to actually blog. So I created a blog, and I was talking about my experience with the culture shock, with being in England as a student and trying to navigate life as a student, really broke and cold. And so writing all of that. Now that blog then became something else, in the sense that it grew. It became what we now call viral. Everyone was reading it. People that were looking to navigate, to emigrate from Nigeria to the UK were reading that. And I felt a little bit that my privacy was a bit exposed, because it was my life, my story. I didn't expect it to become that. And so I said to myself, I will turn my hands at writing fiction and writing stories. And so I used the medium of fiction to still journal and talk about what I really felt passionate about. I think I must have written about 1 million words in practice. And I'm saying that for those that have dreams of being published instantly. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but please do not give up. It took me about 10 years from stopping my blog to actually getting a book on the New York Times bestseller. So it's about writing, constantly improving your craft if you want to get published, because the gates to getting published can be quite hard to unlock. But you can do it. Anyone can do it. If I can do it, you can. And so I just kept on writing, kept on improving, kept on putting my stories out there, and hoping that somebody would hear and pick up my calls, really. Eventually, what then happened was I entered into a competition. I won that competition. It was called the Bath Novel Award in 2018. And it was with this book, with this story in manuscript form that I had written and had no idea where it would go. And from there, I met my publisher, and then everything that happened afterwards just happened. The book was loved, and it's still loved. And I'm so grateful for that. But all I'm trying to say is that if you have a dream and a desire to write, please start where you are. Start with a piece of paper in your room tonight and start to write. You don't have to share with anyone, but please don't stop writing. Eventually, one day you'll feel bold enough to take it somewhere. But you can only do that if you don't stop. So please don't give up.
It's so important, Abby, because I know so many people undervalue where they are right now. They say, oh, it's just a blog, or it's just a journal. And what I'm learning from you is that no, every single step in the process has value, and it helps build you, your skills, your expertise, where you are to where you want to get to. And so anybody out there with a passion for storytelling, please value what it is that you're doing. It's important, and it's much needed. Now, being an author, writing this story, it can be a very lonely experience, because you have this idea in your head, and you alone have to figure out how to get it down onto paper. So, Abby, how did you stay motivated and inspired, especially when it seemed as if it was going to be really hard, nobody was picking your calls? How did you keep the motivation to keep going and to finally produce something that you were really proud of?
I would say that it's one, passion. So I was forward by passion. I would have done this forever, even if nobody read anything I wrote. But there's a satisfaction that comes from that. So one is passion. Two, just believe in yourself. I know it's easier said than done, but look at yourself and say to yourself that I have a story worth telling, and one day somebody's going to hear that story. So please believe in yourself, and you need to love it. So you can't keep doing something that you don't love and keep at it. You just would not sustain through the journey that it might take. So those two things: don't believe in yourself and have a real passion and love for it. And someday something great would happen out of it.
That is fantastic. That's fantastic. Everyone, we all have a voice, and we have a story to tell. Thank you so much, Abby, for your time today. Thank you for sharing your expertise, for your story. Thank you for just letting people know that you can, pursue your dreams, pursue your passion, and still make an impact in the world. So everyone, please go out there, get The Girl with the Louding Voice. Let's read it. Let's tell the story, and let's amplify the stories of millions and millions of young girls who are out there who don't have access to school and who need access to economic opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
much, Abby, so much. This is absolutely wonderful. And I think we're all feeling super, super inspired. So I thank you again for joining me today.